What's up, YouTube? My name is Steve Hyder. I want to welcome you to my channel. This is going to be my hosted channel for Philadelphia Eagles football and just sports information in general. All right, guys, let's get to it. So, today, since this is my first upload to this channel, I thought it would be appropriate if I, on the eve of training camp, just kind of talked about what my early predictions would be for the 53-man roster for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, background, if you don't really know who I am, which I don't expect you do, but I'm a kid that was essentially born and lived the first 12 years of my life in Newcastle, Delaware, just outside of Philadelphia. Moved to North Carolina. Whole family Eagle fans. Kept that kind of heritage with us. So I've been an Eagle fan for a long time. 36 years old. Man, I've been through a lot of different eras. All right, to get to the roster. First thing I want to talk about, if we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles roster and what's going to be coming up this season, is I want to talk about, before you can make a roster, you kind of need to make a few predictions on the different personnel packages that the Eagles will more than likely be using, especially when it comes to offense, because I think that's where a lot of our pre-predictions for the roster are going to probably be way off, because it's going to be really hard to exactly narrow down exactly how the Eagles plan on using their different formations. Give me a second, I'm going to get into that. So, to make my point about these different formations, if you really look across the NFL as a whole, last year, roughly 60 to 65% of the NFL spent its time in basically what would be considered the 11 personnel package, right? Simple package, 11 personnel. That's where you got your 3 wide receivers, your 1 tight end, your 1 running back. It's a very, very common personnel package across the league. This has been going on for the past, probably really intensifying the last 4 years, but over the last 10 years, we've seen a great increase in this particular type of package. With that said, we know the Eagles have a very, very unique roster. And a lot of people are really theorizing that we're going to be heavily leaning on essentially that 12 personnel package. This idea of having 2 receivers, 2 tight ends, and a running back on the field. And if that were to happen, that is what is going to occur. The Eagles roster is probably going to image. It's going to shape itself into that image. So the last common formation you'd see in the NFL is the 21 personnel package, which basically just means you have 2 running backs, you got a tight end on the field, you got 2 receivers on the field. Still want to continue this talk because I think that the Eagles are really going to be difficult to pin down, even if you say, oh, they're going to run the 12 personnel package. Well, they won't be in the 12 personnel package as much as people think. I just think our particular roster is, and the players we have, the skill set players we have, it's going to make it really, really hard to basically say, outside of a few different players, like, oh, these are the players that are going to be in there, because as I'm about to make the point, I just have a feeling the Eagles are going to be all over the place with giving a defense one look and completely changing that look a second later.
Sam, pink, watch the blitz. Brown, 55 Razor.
All right, here's what I'm thinking. This is why I'm saying this is going to be a difficult video to make and why it's going to be difficult to predict the Eagles. To begin with, we start off in something like a 21 personnel package, right? So you got 2 running backs on the field, you got a tight end on the field, and then you got 2 receivers on the field, right? Seems legit, right? Everyone thinks like, oh, okay, probably going to be a running play, first down, right? It's pretty easy for the Eagles with our personnel package just to easily sneak in someone like Dallas Goedert as that one back. He splits out, or he doesn't even need to split out. He's just there to give the image that, to set up play action. And then he's going to run out to the flats himself.
Golden Tate, they fake it to him, they come back the other way.
It's easy for him to split out. Be moved in motion, be split out. It's easy for the 2-back. If it's Corey Clement, if it is Boston Scott, if it is someone like, Terrence Sproles coming back.
He sidesteps. One Steeler defender.
It's really easy to then motion them out, use them as play action. Like, I think it's going to be really easy for the Eagles to really confuse a lot of defenses, and that's just something as basic as the 21 package. How quickly we can make a defense think it's going to be a running play at the last second. It would be easy for Wentz to audible out, and then holy crap, we're actually in an 11 personnel. We're actually really in a 12 personnel package, and I just think that's going to cause all kinds of chaos. Some other thoughts about changing up the formations with the flexibility of our running backs and our tight ends. It wouldn't be hard at all for them to give a defense something that looks like it's going to be a 10 personnel, right? So you're going to have essentially in 10 personnel, 4 receivers on the field and a running back, right? Well, that running back once again is Darren Sproles, Boston Scott, or Corey, Clement. Pretty quickly, now you're in a 0 personnel package where basically you can audible them out, and you got 5 receivers essentially on the field. Is what's happening because Boston Scott, Corey Clement, and Darren Sproles definitely have slot receiving capabilities. It's basically like having a slot receiver on the field. I could easily see a situation to where, you take something like the 12 personnel package and you got a guy, if he learns to slot good enough, you got guys like Matt Collins. If he really learns how to play that slot position, as big bodied as he is, he's got the hands. He's got the physical abilities. His main concern has been health. But if he learns how to run those routes more precisely and learns how to get separation without needing that top end speed, he's a guy that could easily make things look like you're in a 12 personnel package when in reality you're not. What you're really in is an 11 personnel package. But really what you got is 3 receivers, a tight end, and a back on the field. I can see the Eagles going into something like an 11 personnel package with that 3 receivers, a tight end, and a running back on the field. And then within a second, once again, you take one of those running backs, you split them out, and now the defenses are like, clearly there's a mismatch. It's going to be interesting to see what the Eagles do. I mean, we know that the Eagles really love to set up that play action when Foles was in there, and it worked really well. I love Foles. I think Foles was definitely when the chips are down kind of guy. Like he knew how to rally the troops. He didn't seem like the moment was ever too big for him. But I do think some people do lose sight of the fact that as great as Foles was under pressure, the physical skill set is. I'm sorry, Nick Foles is not from a physical standpoint. He's not Carson Wentz. So, man, Carson Wentz coming back healthy. This roster that I think is going to be built around him is crazy. All right, I'm 7 minutes into this, guys. Let me go ahead and let's get into the actual way I see the roster forming. So let me go ahead and I'm going to start off by breaking down how I see the roster. So just numbers. I'm just going to go over simply the way I see the numbers working out on this roster, okay? So the way I see the numbers working out, as I looked at the roster today, the way I saw it was us carrying 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers. So 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, and 10 offensive linemen. I'm going to get into why I'm saying that. I can see arguments here. I can see arguments for carrying 9 offensive linemen, still 6 receivers, and 5 running backs. I can see an argument of carrying 3 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 5 receivers, 3 tight ends, and 9 offensive linemen. I can definitely see an argument of there being 2 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, and then 9 offensive linemen. I can see adding the 4th tight end if you're really thinking Eagles are going to be in that 12 personnel package a lot. I can see the arguments. I truly see the arguments. But you got to look at who the players are and how they're going to fit into the pieces. And I can't see certain players gaining roster spots over other players because special teams is still a consideration. Some of these guys on the tight end side of things would have to really prove themselves on the special teams aspect. You can't just have them there in case there's an injury. They got to be able to contribute in other ways. That's where I think that argument with the 4 tight ends to me seems a little weak at this point. Hey, sorry, training camp, some of these tight ends might show that they actually are legitimate contributors on special teams, and that might change things. All right, so let me go into how I see and who I see and where I see them. Quarterbacks are easy, right, guys? Carson Wentz, Nate Sudfeld. So, you might have noticed I left Clayton Thurston off. I don't think that's a surprise. I don't think he's ready. I think that he's a candidate for probably the pup in the IR. If that guy even scrapes his finger, needs a band-aid, I think he's going on the pup and then the IR. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think he makes this roster. Not this year. He's not ready. Let's be honest. If we lost Carson Wentz and Nate Sudfeld went down with an injury for any kind of a period of time he's going to miss, there's no way they were going to hand the realms over to him anyways. They weren't going to hand him the ball. There's just no way. They were going to go get somebody off the street anyways. All right, moving on. Running backs. I don't think the 4 running backs, my last running back on the list might be a little controversial, and I'll explain how I'm going to lump this all in, but Jordan Howard's going to be our number 1. Corey Clement will be our number 2. He may get surpassed at the beginning of towards the middle of the end of the year. Clearly, right now, he's the number 2. Number 3 would be Miles Sanders, although I don't think he's really going to be a traditional number 3 because I think it's going to take him time. I think it's going to take him a long time to get into football shape, get the playbook down. He's already missed some time. I think he's going to have a little rougher start than what people are anticipating. I think he's definitely worth the time. He's worth the effort, but I think it's going to take him some time. After that, Boston Scott. Boston Scott would be who else I put on this roster. He's got punt returning abilities. He's got kick returning abilities. This kid is a shifty, out of the backfield receiving type back. He's a tough little guy. He's young. Hey, I love Darren Sproles, man, but Sproles is up there in age. I mean, Sproles right now is clearly better than Boston Scott. Don't get me wrong, but you got to project the roster a few years down the road. I also think that Boston Scott probably wouldn't make it on the practice squad. He would more than likely get signed by another team. All right, let's go into how I see the offensive line shaping up before I move forward. Mind you, the way I shaped the roster was with 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, and 10 offensive linemen. So, starting 5, Jason Peters, Isaac Suomalo, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks when he gets back, Lane Johnson. Clearly your 5. Your 2 backups, which I think are probably right now, they're going to be there, which number 1, your first round pick, Andre Dillard. He's going to clearly be on the team. Second guy that I've seen other analysts not even put him on their list, and I was just like, what is wrong with him? Like, how do you miss this? Steven Wisniewski. You need an experienced interior guard to play backup. You also need a guy that, if something really happens, you need a guy that can either come in and guard or center. Isaac Suomalo can do that, but you're shifting around 2 places if you got to do that. I'd rather shift around 1, unless clearly Wisniewski just can't play center. He just doesn't have it up to him. He's done it in the past, not necessarily the most successful at it, but he's done it. He's got game experience. He can do it. To me, he's a sure lock for this roster right now. Past that, Vaitai is on it. Halapapula, I don't know how to say his name. You guys know what I'm talking about. Vaitai is on the roster. Reason being is he's probably our starting right guard until Brandon Brooks comes back. What his long-term future will be at the Eagles, I think that's in peril. I think he's in jeopardy. But I think this year he's on there. So that really only leaves, to me, a few other people that could really, really be fighting for roster positioning. Number 1 is Jordan Mailata. And early indication seems to be that he's going to make the roster. He hasn't got pads on yet. I'm cautious on that because I got to see him during training camp. I got to see him in preseason. I think the coaching staff's going to need to as well. The guy I'm starting to lose a little hope in is Matt Pryor. All indications is that he's really not having a good summer. And I think looking at the way I have this roster laid out with Peters, Somala, Kelsey, Brooks, Johnson, Dillard, Wisniewski, Vaitai, Mailata, I think Matt Pryor is in a lot of trouble if he does not get it together. So, is that guard swing positioning? We'll see. We'll definitely see. He'd be that 10th guy that, in my opinion, he needs to get it together. But right now, I'd have him in. All right. So, let's keep going. Let's talk about some skill set positionings. You guys might have been asking me, where's Darren Sproles on your list? Because they didn't bring him back for no reason. He's clearly going to make the roster. I agree. He's going to make the roster. Maybe in theory, he's added as the fifth running back. I doubt that's how they're going to play the roster positioning. He's probably going to be a sixth receiver. It's the way I think that they're going to structure it. So I think if they use him in the running back role, that basically means Boston Scott is probably not going to make the roster. And I think that can really hurt the Eagles in the long run because I don't think he's going to make it. I think other teams are they've been paying attention to Boston Scott. How do I see it? You got your big four who are clearly going to be on the roster unless there's a trade or something like that. Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson. Here's your 1 and 2. Your X and your Y. Your Z or your slot is going to be Nelson Aguilar. And then JJ Arcega Whiteside is clearly going to be that fourth guy. Past that, I think you have a lot of competition. I would put the fifth guy being Darren Sproles, or your sixth guy. But I think where the real competition comes in now is you have these group of kids who are going to be fighting out for that last spot. And I think it's going to be an epic fight. And I'll give you who my prediction is, but I just want to say the names just in case later on it proves that one of these kids beat out the person I think it's going to be. But the two main ones everyone knows is Matt Collins and Shelton Gibson. That's your A and B for that last role there. All right. The guys I think who could also challenge and push, Charles Johnson. I don't think he's that serious of a contender for the position, though he's on the wrong side of 30. Markin Mikel. From what I understand, is Mikel's had like a really, really good summer. So if he keeps it up with the pads on, he might push out Gibson and Hollins. It's possible. I think the coaching staff kind of likes Braxton Miller. I think they like Greg Ward a little bit. I think both those guys they're capable of playing the slot, but we'd have to see. Did see major development during training camp and during the preseason, but I would say they have an outside shot at earning that. One I think can be a real threat here for the sixth receiver spot, and I would add him in as option C. So if A is Matt Collins, B is Shelton Gibson, I would say this person would be C to me. DeAndre Hopkins. I'm going to explain why I see DeAndre Hopkins as a huge threat to make the roster. He has outside speed. If something happens to Deshaun Jackson, you're going to need somebody who can run deep routes. The next guy available who has enough speed to get by a defender, get by his defensive backs, and to really cause it, defensive coordinator to say, hey, this guy's not Deshaun Jackson, but we're not going to let him run free back there. It's DeAndre Hopkins. So I think he does have an outside chance at making the roster. My prediction, it's going to be Matt Collins. I think Matt Collins is clearly the most skilled out of those guys. If it's solely based on the decision, solely based on special teams, I think it'll be Shelton Gibson because he's clearly the best special teams player out of those guys. But Matt Collins comes in with a reputation of supposedly he's supposed to be a good special teams player. We haven't necessarily seen it in Philadelphia yet, but we'll see. Maybe injuries had a lot to do with that. We'll see. Moving on. Where I see the tight ends. I only put 3 on my roster. You know those 3. Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Richard Rodgers. This is where a lot of y'all probably argue with me. Some of y'all are going to be really adamant that you think there's going to be 4 tight ends. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying to put a 4th tight end there. Who you taking out? Who's coming off your roster? What are you doing to your special teams? Like there's just other concerns, with carrying that 4th. I just think that it's still quite easy enough to maybe sneak a guy through the practice squad, find another guy in the league somewhere that you put on the practice squad that could come in and fill that body if it needs to be filled, or to get a guy off the street that, a veteran who got cut and still has a little football life left in him, but, unless there's an emergency, no one wants to really put him in the lineup. That's where my money would be. So Ertz, Goddard, Rodgers, those are my 3 tight ends. I think Perkins and Ty I think they're destined for the practice squad, or some of them may have lost eligibility. I have to really look that up. But nonetheless, that's where I feel they're at. All right, that's my offense, guys. My defense.
Can you feel that thing that's oozing out your doggone hand? That thing is beating your doggone chest right now.
My defense, I don't really think there's too many surprises. I think some of you guys might be a little different on me when it comes to positions like a linebacker, but I think we all know who's going to be on there for the defensive line. My bet would be Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, your left and right defensive ends. I think Vinny Curry will start the year out as that third defensive end, that rush defensive end position. But I think that all the indications is Josh Sweat's going to take that job. That Josh Sweat has been impressing, and he's been impressive, I should say, and he looks good. From what I understand, is that this kid he's a real deal. Past Curry and Sweat, I think it's Sharif Miller. Clearly, he's going to have a year to develop here. He might play a little bit in some games. Hopefully, he shows us a little flash here and there. But that's my 5. Sorry, guys. Joe Osman, love him to death, man. He's not making the roster. I can't see it. Who do you take off, basically? Because I can't see him making it. Defensive tackles. I got 5, man. I got 5, and I think there can be some controversy on that 5th defensive tackle position. I think our game plan is to rotate as many bodies as we can in and out. Maybe we carry 4 defensive tackles, but I think it's 5. And I think there's 4 locks on defensive tackle. Fletcher Cox, Malik Jackson. No crap. Tim Jernigan. No crap. Right? Hassan Ridgeway would be my lock at the 4. Every indication of what I heard about Hassan Ridgeway is that this kid has got some moves. He needs a little time to develop, but the Eagles, from what I understand, the coaching staff is incredibly high on this kid. I think he's a lock on this roster. That really leaves this battle between 3 guys for 1 spot. Trayvon Hester, Bruce Hector, and Anthony Rush. I think the safe money would be probably on Trayvon Hester. I think Bruce Hector has an outside shot, but I'm going to go with the shocker, man. I think it's early in these, how we see the roster playing out. You got to have some surprises in there, or else why do the videos? So my surprise is that the 5th defensive tackle will be Anthony Rush. Fletcher Cox, Malik Jackson, Tim Jernigan, Hassan Ridgeway, Anthony Rush. The reason I said about Anthony Rush is this guy's a big wrecking ball. He's going to be really good on short yardage situations, goal line defense. I think that basically means he's got a place and he's got a role. I think Trayvon Hester is a better skill set player than he is. He's better at the everyday things, but this guy, he's got something. He does have some unique set to him where he's this guy that's 6'5", like 300 and 30, 40, 50 pounds. He's a big dude. And the guy's got some speed. He's going to be just a bowling ball down there. All right, linebackers. Guys, I see 5 linebackers. 5 linebackers. We play a lot of nickel. I'm just going to be straightforward. We don't run a lot of 43 anymore. We play a lot of nickel. 43 might be the base defense. We might start games in the 43, but I think the majority of the time we'll be in the nickel. And there's only going to be 2 linebackers on the field, meaning it seems a little unnecessary to carry 6. Which means some of the players you guys love, they're not making the roster. Nigel Bradham's a lock. Camus Grugier-Hill. Camus Grugier-Hill's that's that number 2 linebacker. Zach Brown. That's your 3rd. I think that when we go to nickel, it'll probably primarily be Nigel Bradham and Camus Grugier-Hill. Zach Brown will probably get some rotation in there. From what I understand, is that while Zach Brown has been asked to do a lot of coverage, he is capable of doing it. Who I think the 4th and 5th linebackers will be. 4th one is, I think if this individual is 100% healthy, he's going to make the roster because he's that good. Paul Warlow. I think Paul Warlow is your 4th linebacker. And then I know this is going to make a lot of people mad. And I think the last line, that 5th linebacker position is really up for grabs between 4 people. Nathan Gary, L.J. Fort, Joey Alfieri, and then T.J. Edwards. I know a lot of you guys love T.J. Edwards. I don't think the coaching staff is as high on him as you guys are. I think the coaching staff is actually much higher on Joey Alfieri than they are on T.J. Edwards. It's just what I've heard. L.J. Fort, I don't know, man. Unless he's just heads and shoulders better on special teams, better in those reserve roles than Nathan Jerry. I think it's going to be Nathan Jerry over L.J. Fort because L.J. Fort is going to bring compensation. It's going to bring a compensation pick. So, just doing the basics on it, I think he's in trouble. Put it simply. I honestly think he's in trouble. So that's my 5 linebackers: Bradham, Grugier-Hill, Brown, Warlow, Jerry. All right. Corners. I think we're carrying 6. I think we're carrying 6 because we got 6 guys who can play, unless there's a trade. Like I said, guys, it's hard to predict, man. If there's trades, this stuff's going to really be reshaping the roster here. My 6, Ronald Darby, Avonte Maddox. I think that's your left and your right cornerbacks. Sidney Jones, Russell Douglas, Cravon LeBlanc, Jalen Mills. If we only carry 5, I think Jalen Mills is in a lot of trouble if we only carry 5. And the coaching staff love that. They love that kid, but like him not being able to get out there and compete when you got 5 guys who can compete and are good, I wouldn't want to be in his position if they don't carry 6. Because he's either probably trade bait or he's going to be cut if they don't carry 6. I think they're going to carry 6. I think Jalen Mills, I think they're high enough on him, they're going to keep him. So it really leaves one other position, guys, safety. And to me, safety is not a hard one to project. It's going to be 4. And to me, I think the 4 are pretty obvious. Malcolm Jenkins. Wow, really? Malcolm Jenkins. My bad, guys. Malcolm Jenkins. Rodney McLeod. Andrew Sendejo. Blake Countess. I think those are your 4. I mean, DeAndre Hall and Trey Sullivan might have an outside shot, but Blake Countess is a very good special teams player. I think he's going to get it just on the fact of how good he is at a special teams play and the fact that he can come in and play a few snaps if we need him to. All right, guys. You really don't need me to run off my roster. I think you guys understand what's left, guys. You got your kicker, your punter, and your long snapper. That's my 53. So go back over it again, guys. 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 5 wide receivers, 3 tight ends. I'm sorry. Scratch that. 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, and offensive linemen. 5 defensive ends, 5 defensive tackles, 5 linebackers, 6 cornerbacks, 4 safeties, the kicker, the punter, the long snapper. You guys went over all the players I had. That's my Eagles 53-man roster. All right, y'all. Y'all do me a favor if you somehow seen this video. Guys, do me a favor if you can thumbs it up. Subscribe, because 8 subscribers, man. Trying to grow the channel. Just starting. Also, do some call to action, guys. Let's have some interaction here. What'd I get wrong, in your opinion? I know some of y'all gonna be like, oh, TJ Edwards. I'm gonna be real with you. I don't think TJ Edwards is making the roster. But hey, I could be wrong, man. This kid could ball out. We'll see. What else, guys? What'd I get wrong? Too many receivers. I got a feeling some of y'all are gonna try to fight me back on the tight end position and say, well, yeah, the rest of the league might be doing 64% inside of the 11 personnel package, but we're going to be in 12 personnel package more than the rest of the league. And I think you're right, but I don't know what that means we're carrying forward because, face it, hey, I like Rodgers a lot, but Richard Rodgers is not Dallas Goedert. Still a deep fall off from, so I just, then moving from another guy, like, come on, man, you're talking about Perkins and Ty, like, come on, they're not even the same league as Goddard and Ertz. All right. Come on, guys. Tell me in the comments what I get wrong. All right. Peace. I'm out. EAGLES Eagles, guys.